Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm retired Colonel Rob Maness back with you at our regularly scheduled time, and I want to welcome you back to the Rob Maness Show. And friends, most of you know I ran for the U.S. Senate in Louisiana for one reason. The establishment candidates from both parties had a clear history that prioritized their donors, which includes lobbyists, more than the American people. I ran on policies that are now called America First policies, like energy independence, ending forever wars, and the policies that support them, eliminating regulations and taxes as much as possible, criminal justice reform, and most importantly, to protect our liberty. And I think you see now, after a year and a half of obstructing our liberty, why that's so important. And since then, I've stayed active in politics, especially to get America First policies implemented. And this coming year, that's why you've already seen candidates for the U.S. Congress appear as guests on my show, because we have to elect America First candidates, and it's got to be from the federal all the way to the local level. The men and women we elect must know their top priority is protecting liberty and providing for the common defense, period. That's it. All other policy and legislative endeavors have to be prioritized after those two priorities. So today's guest is an America First candidate from Mississippi, running for the 4th congressional seat. And yes, he is challenging an incumbent Republican. He is currently in the state Senate and has a proven track record of standing up to the powerful on behalf of his constituents. So without further ado, Mississippi State Senator Brice Wiggins, welcome to the Rob Maness Show, sir. How are you?
Thank you, Colonel. Appreciate it. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I hope you and your family and friends all have a great Thanksgiving. This is Thanksgiving week, so we appreciate you. The show is live now, folks, as a reminder, and you can leave comments and ask questions on the Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media you're using. And we can see those and can address them. So we appreciate your participation. And this show will also be published on the internet on Thanksgiving morning. So happy Thanksgiving to you and everybody else out there. How's the campaign going? You just announced, what, about 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago?
Yes, it's actually, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we announced. It has been tremendous, the support that we've gotten. And as you pointed out, we have declared for the 4th congressional district in Mississippi. The incumbent, sad to say, has gone the way of the swamp in D.C. That's a fact based on the ethics violations that have come out in his name, and really based on the stuff that we've read and that's been made public, that there's really no dispute about it. And so, yes, we've garnered a lot of support. We are hitting the things that we need to hit, and it's been great. People are, Colonel, people are tired of the things that they see coming out of D.C. The socialist policies, the selfish, self-interested politicians that are up there. They want somebody who's going to stand up for them. And one of the things that people have responded to our campaign is when I tell them, because it's the truth, that when I ran for the Mississippi State Senate, I was a prosecutor doing a job that I loved. I had 2 small kids at the time. I got 2 kids. They were smaller, certainly at the time. Left, decided it was that important, left my job, cut my family income in half, and ran for the Senate and took on a 3-term incumbent and won, because people were tired of what they were seeing. And, it's a sacrifice, and I'm willing to do that sacrifice for the people.
Well, I checked your background before I had you on, and most importantly, before I used the term America First candidate with you, Bryce, because that's important. And what you just said about why you ran for the state Senate, it's critical for people that you want to vote for you to understand that you took on the establishment. And while you were in office as a state senator, it appears to me that you've taken on the corruption and the establishment while at the same time taking care of your constituents. from the feedback that I've seen you get from them, because I did my research on you. But I want them to hear it from you. I want my folks to hear it from you, because some of them live in Mississippi. Why do you call yourself an America First candidate?
Well, first of all, welcome to Mississippi. I know you've recently, I guess, put down roots, so thank you. And then I appreciate you doing your background check, because that's what has to be done. When people are electing candidates, they're hiring them for a job. And I think sometimes it's taken too flippantly, and I'm all about accountability. And so, yes, I have, just to kind of highlight some of my, I guess, bona fides, if you will. When I got elected to the Senate, it broke in Mississippi about the Department of Marine Resources and the scandal. And for those that don't know, you can certainly go and Google it. But the director of the Department of Marine Resources went to prison for misappropriating and stealing money. And as chairman, I was a chairman my freshman year of the Ports and Marine Resources Committee. And I put forward and got passed in the legislature the DMR, Department of Marine Resources Accountability Act and Transparency. And that required certain things, including an audit, to be done at their expense. Bottom line is that hasn't happened since then. And it was an abuse of taxpayers' trust. Another example is in my local area, the local county-owned hospital, paid for by government fund, by taxpayer funds. The hard-working men and women who had spent decades working, their pension went away due to mismanagement at a minimum. And I filed in the legislature a bill that opened the backroom doors that was going on with the community hospitals in the state of Mississippi, and literally took on the hospital establishment in the state of Mississippi, and was told by different individuals and different ones that I wouldn't continue to serve. Yet we worked through it, and actually with the help of Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves at the time, we got it through the Senate, got it through the House, and it was passed, and took that on. And so, and since then, it's been operating much better. To your point about criminal justice reform, as I told you, I'm a former prosecutor, spent 9 years putting people in prison. I'm proud of that. Tough on crime. That being said, our system is in such a way that it needs to be reformed. And I have led the efforts on criminal justice reform in the Mississippi Senate. And by the way, my friends, prosecutors, if you will, were on the opposite side. There were some hard discussions that had to happen, but we did it, and I held my ground, and the citizens are better for that. So those are just some examples that we've been able to do.
On the subject of criminal justice reform, Bryce, I think I told you I've been involved in it too. And in Louisiana, I was a small part of the big team that got the Jim Crow law for non-unanimous juries passed in the constitutional amendment. So we removed that. Now all juries are unanimous as the way.
Which, by the way, in Mississippi, it's always been unanimous.
Exactly. I was going to point that out. You beat me to it, but there are some, and one of the things that I'm concerned about currently, and this will bring some current events in here, is me and people like you not being able to work with our partners on the other side of the aisle, because they've gone so, not all of them, but the other side of the aisle has gone so far to the left towards socialism and I even say communism at this point. I spent a long time fighting against communism in my Air Force career, and so did my dad and my brother. So we know what it looks like. But, you know, like, here's the subject I want to talk about just a little bit to give you a chance to talk about it, and that is the subject of criminal justice reform as it relates to bail reform. I have never been for that. And we see what happened in Waukesha Wisconsin just the other night with a guy out on bail just a couple days prior, and he ends up being a mass murderer with his vehicle. And we see all kinds of bad things happening in New York City, Chicago, and those kind of things. Where do you stand on that? And the more, I hate to say left, because it's not really a left-right issue, but the issues that are kind of out in the field, out in the left field or out in the right field. There's fields in both of them where you could go to extremes, but that's not the kind of criminal justice reform that I've supported. But where are you going to stand on that kind of stuff at the federal level?
Yeah. So first, if I can say, one of the things that falls under the big umbrella of criminal justice reform, and you may want to talk about it, is the civil asset forfeiture, which in Mississippi we've dealt with. On the bail reform, we haven't really, I guess, addressed much of that. That being said, first, the socialist policies of the blue states and the blue big cities, they're ridiculous. If you, all you have to do is look at places, I think it's like in Minneapolis, where they put forward these petitions to defund the police and to do all that. Are you kidding me? And now when they actually did it, they're going, oh, please come back. Please come back. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. And what that shows you, Colonel, is the extreme is dictating, particularly in the Democrat Party. And that is not, I will tell you, certainly that is not Mississippi. And I certainly believe that is not the majority of Americans, as you can see in places like Minneapolis, where, they thought that this was going to be an easy sell. The people fought back and voted it down of what they were doing. Now, so on the actual bail reform, let me say this. I actually see it as a constitutional issue. Why? Because, and I think the media, particularly, they do not accurately talk about what the issue is. And first of all, bail is what it is an assurance that you will come to court for your trial date. Okay. At the end of the day, that's what it is. Okay. Now, bail is determined based on a number of factors, but the two biggest ones are you a flight risk and are you a danger to the community? Okay. Those are the two big general ones. Based on what I've seen of the stuff that happened in, I think it is in Wisconsin, certainly a danger to the community. So why wasn't the bail set at a higher rate? Okay. But what I do think, Colonel, is that people misunderstand bail because they think they use it as punishment when you haven't been gone through the constitutionally guaranteed trial that we have. And one of the things that separates America from Russia and China is our belief in due process and our belief in innocent until proven guilty. So there is a balance there. And when I was a prosecutor, I stood before the judge and I asked for bail, and I would agree at times, depending on the case, that a bail needed to be less here for whatever reason, but I was guided by the law and by the judge. And so what I see is a lot of pontificating going on, and not by lawyers who are actually doing it in the courtroom.
Good. That's good. I appreciate your approach to that. One more question about criminal justice reform, and then we can move on to some of the other issues that you haven't needed to address as a state senator that you're going to need to talk about and act on at the federal level. And that is my next project on CJR is prosecution reform. And I was convinced. I watched the entire trial and observed through a panel of attorneys of the Rittenhouse trial. And
no offense, Ron, but did you not have something else to do?
Well, this is my job now, so I want, and I'm a big Second Amendment advocate, but that's not the issue. There is prosecutorial misconduct that occurred in the Rittenhouse case. And to me, and I believe that prosecutors are able to get away with that kind of stuff every day. it just so happened that Rittenhouse was a kid who was made famous by the media and those kind of things. So everybody was watching it. But I think especially amongst the larger population of folks that go before a court are black males, young black males. And I believe prosecutors are able to get away with that kind of stuff all the time. And that was just not an aberration, what we saw up in Kenosha. At least not all of it was an aberration. There may be some, but because there was too much of it. You're a former prosecutor. Will you take that on and let's get the justice system in the United States right for everybody?
Yeah. So first of all, I agree that we need to get the justice system. The justice system needs to be right for everybody. Mm-hmm. Black, white, blue, red, yellow, green, whatever the case may be. Yeah. Okay. So that's first and foremost. I'm not going to, because I didn't watch it. I was actually practicing law for the most part. I didn't have a chance to watch all of what went on. So I'm going to reserve judgment on that. I did see some headlines. I know that the media tends to pick and choose what they highlight when you're in a trial. And mind you, I've tried jury trials. The last trial that I did before leaving the DA's office to run for the Senate was putting a 14-year-old in prison for murder of a grandfather who came to watch his grandson play football and took a wrong turn. Okay. I've been before juries. I've done grand larcenies. I've done arson. All right. So it is not, it's not an easy thing. So I'm not going to cast aspersions. That being said, what I have seen is that the weight of the government, i.e. the laws and things, is very big. And the prosecutors have an obligation to wear what I call the white hat, not just get the conviction, but do justice and do what's right. I know for me, and I can speak for me, is that when I would look at cases and it was told us, are you doing what's right? Yes. You want to convict for the victims and for the justice, but is this the right thing? And sometimes those decisions are hard. Now in the courtroom, you have the judge, and you have the defense, and you have the prosecutor, and I know there's an instruction that gets read that says what lawyers say is not evidence, and I think that's important to remember. Is that what lawyers say is not evidence. It's simply argument. And the media tries to play that up. What is evidence is what comes from the witness stand, the documents that are allowed by the judge, and that. And the judge is there to be the gatekeeper, if you will. And so, yes, there needs to be changes, just like we've done in Mississippi on the what's called the parole eligibility bill and the criminal justice reform bill. The law was such that there was no reason to go to trial. For example, on a precursor chemical on a meth case, if you had sulfuric acid and you had batteries, you could go to prison for 30 years. Okay. And so that's what the prosecutors were working with. And a lot of times what happens is they don't have all the tools, and we in the legislative branch needs to give them the right tools. But in terms of prosecutorial misconduct, that does happen. It's happened in Mississippi, not where I'm at, but there is. If you talk to anybody in Mississippi, there's you may remember the Curtis Flowers case. Yes. That went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It was now ruled that he's a free man. In that area of the state, there's been a DA who has been alleged to have engaged in prosecutorial misconduct. And that's a shame. But in the Mississippi, DAs are elected. And that goes back to people electing the right people. And they need to hold our candidates accountable, and not just, because it's your daddy's best friend or whatever. It needs to be, is that person showing the values of what is liberty minded, what our Constitution means. So I hope I answered your question.
Well, you did, but I hope you'll go and at least skim the transcript of that trial,
I
because
will.
it was obvious to the attorneys
Yeah.
that I observed watching the trial live, who were both prosecutors and defense attorneys, that this was a political prosecution. And
Yeah.
the ADA Binger as much as said so during the trial and got away with it. So
But let me say
I,
that
I
to
would
that
love to
point.
see you. I'd love to hear what your take on it once you have more details on it.
But Ron, to that point right there, no prosecution should be just political in nature. It should be
Exactly.
about justice. Okay. And
Yeah.
if they were doing it for no other reason than political reasons, then that's wrong. Okay. It's about what should be done about justice. And prosecutors, depending on the state you're in, have a lot of discretion.
Yeah.
And you need to use that discretion wisely. And I know I was faced with cases that, yeah, it would be easy to go put this person on trial and to do that, but you have to use discretion. And yeah, I just saw somebody say accountability is needed by prosecutors. I agree.
Yeah.
That's why we need the right people in the right places. And so, no, it should not be just for political purposes. And
Exactly.
the
It's
justice
my opinion.
system
They
should
should have
not be
never
weaponized.
even. They should have never charged that kid with what they charged him with. If there was some discretionary error there. Let's put it that way, and it'll be borne out with the facts, whether it was actual misconduct or not. I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So moving to the federal level, and this is kind of related to prosecutors and everything. There's a lot going on at the federal level. Conservatives are feeling a lot of conservatives in this country are feeling like they are being punished. They are being threatened. You have parents being threatened with the FBI as terrorists by the government, the Department of Justice. You have the January 6th defendants that are still incarcerated. We've now seen the facts that show that some of them have been abused, been kept in solitary confinement for nonviolent crimes, haven't been let out on bail. And they're all almost all nonviolent crimes. I understand the violent ones, and if somebody's a flight risk and those kind of things. So what is what's your action plan to protect and reinstate American liberty post this craziness of the pandemic? And I'm proud to say that the free state of Mississippi does not have that craziness. And that Louisiana had a little bit of it, but the rest of this country, some parts of it are just absolutely gone nuts, and we've lost liberty in this country. And once liberty is lost, it's extremely difficult to regain it. We're counting on people like you that get into the Congress to realize that's your number one priority, is to protect our liberty. But we've got to do some work to reinstate it. What's your action plan?
Well, the simplest answer, you kind of answered it for me, is to do what we do in Mississippi. I mean, you said that we don't necessarily have those issues on a general basis, certainly not what the federal government has. And it's about taking what we do here in general terms and forcing it to happen in the U.S. Congress and pushing back on these areas. As a former prosecutor, and I'm currently, which I don't know that we mentioned this, I'm currently chairman of Judiciary A in the Mississippi Senate and have been chairman of Judiciary B in the Mississippi Senate, which are the two committees that oversee all these legal issues. And with my knowledge and experience, it's putting someone in Congress that understands these issues and that can do it and is willing to stand up and fight on these issues. And so, in terms of the federal judicial system, it's really just focusing on the laws that are in place, but also the Department of Justice, at the end of the day, is overseen by the president and the attorney general. And so it's important who's in those offices. And of course, we see who's in the office now. But look, I will tell you, I had some concerns when President Trump was in office with how some things were handled. The Department of Justice does not need to be weaponized, no matter who's in the office. It's about justice. And so, to answer kind of where you're going, as a congressional member, and certainly if I was in a position like I am now to be chairman, I would push back on that. Let me say this. I actually read the biography of Senator Jim Eastland, who was chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the U.S. Senate for decades. And, there's things that I didn't necessarily agree with him on that. But what happened at that time was a willingness to push back on the executive branch where that stuff happens. And by the way, in Mississippi, the DAs and the attorney general are considered part of the executive branch. So I think it falls under checks and balances, and it's incumbent upon us as legislators being in Congress or certainly in the Mississippi legislature to change the law to make that happen.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And you are, if you see a president of the United States, regardless of what party they are in, and when I say president of the United States and his executive branch, who he's supposed to be in charge of, doing the things like this Garland memo that responded to a political memo from the National School Board Association to say these parents are acting like terrorists, and then actually sets up the FBI's surveillance system to tag people that are calling out their school boards, and then lies to Congress about it. Certainly, if a Trump administration or a Republican administration had done something like that, I expect my congressman to push back on that because of the checks and balances and the way the Constitution is designed. But aren't you worried? I mean, I'm worried that the Constitution is not being followed, except for when you're trying to get your political opponent. With this Justice Department, that certainly looks like what's happening from a layman's perspective and a citizen out here on the South Gulf Coast.
Yeah, I'm concerned about that, and I'm afraid for it. That's why we need good constitutional, smart folks in office, but who are willing to fight back. Look, I've said this, that our founders set up our criminal justice system to be handled in a certain way, and it's gone beyond that, and we need to get back to our constitutional principles on that.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay. You mentioned the budget, the federal budget's being out of control. What are you going to focus on reducing with the federal budget when you're up there, Bryce?
So first of all,
that's a big question.
Do you got another 3 hours or something?
Give me the bullet points.
Right. Well, first of all, in my my Senate capacity, I've called on the federal government to pass the Balanced Budget Act. Okay. And we do that to my point about doing what we do in Mississippi. Okay. In these areas, we have to balance our budget. We do it every single year. I've been a member of the appropriations. We balance the budget. And guess what? That means you have to say no. There's people that come to us and they go, no, we can't afford it. It's our children's future. And we can't do it. Congress can't seem to get out of the way to do that. And so that's first and foremost, is to have the fortitude to be able to say no on those things. Then, everybody has their pet projects that they do that continually adds to the deficit and the budget debt and the debt. And so it's about handling those things. I will say this, Ron, and I don't hear many people talking about it, but I'm going to bring it up, and that is the use of the reconciliation process in the U.S. Congress. Now, that's kind of maybe a niche thing, but that's because the Congress cannot and will not do their job. What they have resorted to is doing a procedure where it puts all the power in the parliamentarian of the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives, because the actual elected folks can and won't do what they need to do. And so the only way they can pass a budget is to use the reconciliation process, when our founders required us, and their intent was to have debate on the issues. And so instead of having debate in front of the full people of the United States of America, they do what's called the reconciliation process. And I'd encourage everybody to go out and Google reconciliation process, but that's ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. Now, I'm not there yet, but I will tell you that when you're starting to bypass what is normally in place because you can't get that done, I think that's a problem. And one of my first things I would do is to look at, to stop using the reconciliation process and actually do it like it's expected to be done.
Yeah, I would recommend you look at continuing resolutions too, and eliminate using continuing resolutions. And what we need is some congressmen and women as a forcing function to force the procedure back to committee hearings that hear all these out in each of the stovepipes of the budget the way they're supposed to be, and then the budget get passed that way. And I'm glad to hear you talk about that because I mean, folks out in TV land and internet land may be bored by that, but that's extremely important. If you look at guys like Thomas Massey and folks that push back all the time, they understand that process very well, and are pushing for a return to what I call normal order.
Normal order. I have a saying: process is policy, and in the legislative branch, that's what it is. And too many folks have decided to stop with the process, and you see where we've ended up. And I wanted to go back to what you said. Everything that you're bringing up, Ron, it goes back to what I've heard on the campaign trail. And that is people do not trust their government, nor should they at this stage. Okay. And what's happened is, and this people tell me this, is they don't trust what the government's doing because the things you're highlighting are the things that they look at and they say, are you crazy? People at the end of the day, I believe, want to trust their government. After all, we live in the greatest country there is, but they're fed up with how it's being treated by those that have been entrusted with it. And yes, us elected officials, me as a state senator, I've been entrusted by the citizens of my district to represent them. Okay. I'm not entitled to it. Just like in Congress, you've been entrusted for the benefit of future generations. And what I think, and I certainly think it, but what I'm also hearing is people don't feel like those that are in office are looking out for the future of our country. And I will take it back to my local race. When you have an incumbent, and it's a fact that has been charged, or certainly has been charged with ethical violations, how is that entrusting the future to the next generation?
Exactly. That's a good point. And it's right on the money. On the budget issue, though, outside of the process, the defense budget, have you put much research and thought into that yet? I know folks that aren't at the federal level don't delve into that a whole lot, but I know there's some big defense contractors in our district, I believe.
So to your point, no, I haven't had a chance to sit down and go through the whole thing, or much of it, if at that. Let me say this: I am a strong supporter of the defense. Ingalls Shipbuilding, which builds 70% of the nation's ships, are right here in Mississippi, in my district. We have Keesler Air Force Base. We have the Navy Seabees. So we have a very good relationship with the defense of our country. Is there things that we can be better at budgeting? Most certainly. And that's incumbent upon the Congress to do that. So do I have a specific answer on that? Like, would it be this bolt here or there? No, I don't. But I am going to support a strong defense because I think that's what our founders, one of the number one goals was to have a strong defense of our country. But it can always be better. And I think that that's extremely important. And I see that on the state of Mississippi level. there's things that that are told to us that are important, but we end up having to say no. And so I'm willing to do that.
Yeah, a strong national defense is the best guarantor of peace.
That's right.
And most people don't realize that professional military officers, especially those of us that have been in war, we don't want war. We want a strong national defense so that we never have to go to war with a country like the Soviet Union. They die on the vine, literally, because of our strategic policies that we choose and what we choose to fund or not fund. And how we do that. And I will just give you this piece of free advice is that we're at the end of 2 decades or more of continuous war. And the budget is bloated. And the longer we go with not cutting it back to where it needs to be to maintain a strong national defense so that we maintain the peace, the worse off we're going to be, because we're not going to focus on what needs to be focused on, which is the biggest threat in the world to the United States, and that's the Chinese Communist Party.
Right, which I was going to say, all you have to go look at is the article that came out recently about how big are the Chinese Navy's getting. But you brought up something that brings me back to the other point, which is that what I have found out in the state of Mississippi, when we balance the budget, what that forces you to do is to prioritize. And I can tell you, but it also makes you have to cut, if you will, or at least not say yes to the areas that should not be prioritized. And I can tell you that to your point, I will prioritize national defense, but that's why I said a balanced budget or similar, because what it does is it forces you to make priorities. And as Republicans, in my case, we want a strong defense, and that will be at a top priority. But again, also, like you said, war should be the exception, not the rule. And like you said, you don't want to go to war, okay? But you need to be prepared in case you do. And I think our history of our country shows that things don't end up in a good way when the rule is you go to war and you stay at war. I think that's what you're saying. And I think that's where the American public is as well.
Well, I think any Republican or Democrat that tries to stick with the forever war policies of the last 20 years is dead in the water, so to speak, to use a ship term. And they're not going to go anywhere. And I think you're going to see that in 2022. I know you're short of time, but I do have one more that I want to give you a chance to talk about. And that is, and this is a big question as opposed to a short question with a big answer. But I'm sure you thought about it. But, what will you do when you get to Congress about America's institutions that are out of control? I mean, the institutions of the United States, Bryce, are out of control and being used to really suppress and in some cases, I'm going to say it, oppress the citizens of the United States instead of doing what they're supposed to do, which is working for and serving the American people. What are you going to do to help get those things back in the box? Because the government, the unelected government, is way beyond control of even a president of the United States. I think we saw that. I know I did during the Trump administration, and I think you see it in the Biden administration, just in a different sort of way.
So I guess I'll answer it this way. We have to get back to our founding principles, which is checks and balances. And for too long, people look to the executive branch or they look to the judicial branch, i.e. the Supreme Court, to answer their problems, when in fact our founders created the legislative branch to solve those issues. And if you go read your history, you will, not you in particular, but people will see that Congress has given away too much of its power, if you will, of the people. They've given it. There's a thing called the Chevron principle. If you go and research that, you may know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Okay. Do you want to describe what that is?
No, go right ahead.
So that was basically a principle that's been around for certainly at least, I think, 20 or 30 years that gave deference to agencies to make law. Well, gosh dang it. The last time I checked, the founder said Congress is there to make laws. And so that's an example of the bureaucracy and the no checks that are going on. And so it's about the legislative branch, i.e. Congress, stepping back up and doing what they've been sent there to do. Ron, I just saw a recent poll that said Congress's public favorability is at 21%. Are you kidding me? 21%. Okay. That's across. I mean, that's what that tells you. And let me say this, in the Gallup poll, and it's out there, you can see it says the Americans look at Congress as being out of touch and ineffective. It's about we have to get back to being in touch and being effective. And so, and I think it has to, you can't eat the elephant all in one bite. But I can tell you, since I've been in the Mississippi legislature, that I've taken bites every year I've been in there to get us back to where we should be. And that's what I pledge to do when I get in Congress, and get in there and not lose. And let me put it this way, always keep at the forefront the checks and balances and what our founders intended when they wrote the Constitution.
Yeah, and in addition to Chevron deference, I would like to see an elimination of Congress's delegation of legislative authority to the letter agencies that they've given, because basically that's why we don't have hearings anymore to talk about these laws. These agencies get to make law, and unless somebody objects and enough people do it, then it becomes law, and it's been done by a bunch of bureaucrats, and that's not what the founders intended. So it's good to hear that you want to get. You're going to demand that we get and work to getting back to that. And you may not be able to eat the elephant more than one bite at a time, but you damn sure better not let this big sucker sit on you, because this is the biggest government in the history of mankind, Bryce. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Where can folks find you, donate to you, and all of those kinds of administrative things that especially donate to you?
Thank you for, first of all, thank you for having me on and for you getting the word out. So they can go to our website, brycewiggins.ms. It's my Twitter, Brice Wiggins MS. They can Google Brice Wiggins for Congress on our YouTube channel. All these policies that you're talking about, Ron, and others, I have videos out there so that people know where I stand. And this goes to the point you were making or finishing up with, and that is that it's become too easy for incumbent, for Congress to shirk the responsibility. And I'm willing to stand up and take a position on things, even if it doesn't make every single person happy. And you can see that on my website. I've got my Facebook, Brice Wiggins for Congress. I would encourage everybody to go out there and please follow us. I think you'll like what you see.
Yeah, and as I said at the beginning, I believe you are an America First candidate. That's why I'm personally supporting your campaign and my political action committee, Gator PAC. I'm announcing it right here, right now, that we are supporting Senator Wiggins' campaign for the U.S. Congress, because if you don't realize after the end of this conversation that he is an America First candidate and somebody we need at the federal level, then go back and listen to it again and again and over and over. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Bryce, and good luck on the campaign. We'll see you around out there, and have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there and to you and your family.
Thanks, Bryce. Have a good one. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was State Senator Brice Wiggins from the state of Mississippi, who's running for the 4th Congressional District for Congress in 2022. I suggest you check him out. He's the real deal, is what he looks like and sounds like. And not just that, but he walks the talk if you look at his record. And we need men and women exactly like that in the U.S. Congress in order to get this country back on track, protect our liberty, provide for the common defense, and deprioritize all of that other spending and get this government that's out of control and our institutions that are out of control and being used against us back to serving you, the American citizen, as the founders intended it to be. Have a great Thanksgiving. My family and I wish you a safe and happy long weekend, this wonderfully, purely American holiday. Enjoy your turkey, because at this network, you're not going to be told not to buy a turkey. Have a great one, and we'll see you next week.